Graham. I'm the president of the Humanists of Tallahassee, and the Humanists of Tallahassee are hot, along with the fine people of the Humanists of West Florida. We started this venture back in 2022 with the first iteration of the Gulf Coast Secular Assembly, and we met in lovely Defuniak Springs, which actually is quite lovely, and it was fabulous. So we try to do this again this year, but sometimes shit happens. So we've had to switch to a digital format, and but regardless, we are really excited that you're all here. Before we start, I would like to thank my co-planners from the Pensacola group, Betty Myers and Buzz Ryland, for working with us over the past few years. You are fabulous people, and we'll hear a little more from them at the very end. And just keep in mind, we're looking forward again to meeting in person again in 2026. So I'm going to get this started off right away. Before we get to Aron, I kind of teased you all with a little bit of a warm-up act, if you will, and you've already heard from her already. We have Samantha McGuire here. She is the National Field Director for American Atheists, who's helped sponsoring this event. Sam has a varied background in counseling, education, event planning, and volunteer management. So as AA's National Field Director, she works closely with local grassroots activists and volunteers and affiliates like those of us here in Tallahassee and the Pensacola group as well, to help them engage on emerging local civil rights issues, advocate for state level legislation, and help build thriving communities. Sam became involved in secular organizing and activism following the 2012 Reason Rally, first becoming a founding member of the Southern Maryland chapter of the Washington Area Secular Humanists, or WASH, and later president of the regional organization. In 2016, she was the coordinator for over 200 volunteers at Reason Rally, and as well as helping to execute the on-site logistics of that. She was elected to the board of directors, and as president of the Reason Rally Coalition, she served as the volunteer regional director for American Atheists, looking out over the Mid-Atlantic region, and she earned the Atheist Activist of the Year in 2019. She also serves on the national board for Camp Quest. She has a Bachelor's of Science degree in neuropsychology from UMass and a Master's of Science in Counseling from Johns Hopkins, and she is also a certified humanist celebrant. And with that, I'm going to pass it on over to Sam.
Good Lord, that's a long bio. Sheesh.
Who wrote that thing?
Wow. I don't even have to talk about myself at all because you read the whole thing. So that's fantastic. So what I want to point out from my bio, for those of you who haven't met me before, is that I started out as a small group organizer. I started a group in Southern Maryland. We were talking before we opened up the waiting room. I live about an hour and a half south of DC. Maryland overall is a progressive state, but where I live is not at all. It is, we went, I think, 80% for Trump in the last election. And we have some crazy school board candidates, whoever I'm getting feedback from. Hang on a second. I don't know if you all can hear that, but I can hear it. All right, so, nope, still there.
Buzz, I think you need to mute your thing. I'm having trouble doing it for you.
It's the laptop one where you're further away is the one that's giving feedback. Seems better now though. Okay, so where I live is very conservative, very Christian, and very white. I grew up in Massachusetts, in Amherst, Massachusetts, which is a 5-college town. It is the bluest area of a blue state. So when I moved here, I kind of looked around and was like, where the heck did I land? I don't understand what is going on here. I need to find my people. And there was not really a functioning atheist group at the time, so I decided to start one. So all that to say that I've been exactly where our group leaders are at this point, and I definitely have the experience of running a very small group and trying to grow it and make it bigger, make it more functional, make it more impactful in the area that I live in. I found that one of the best ways to do that, I know that probably some of you have had the talk about the ACEs program or heard about our ACEs program, and that has been very effective for a lot of our groups. Basically, what that is taking sort of 4 different types of meetings within your group and making sure that you're running all 4 kinds, because then it draws in different people, right? So The ACES program, A is for activism and advocacy, and C is for community. So that would be your social things, your dinners, your lunches, your coffee meetings. E would be educational. So that would be somewhat like what we're doing today, where you meet in libraries, you meet on Zoom, you have a speaker come in, they're going to talk about a topic, they're going to educate you about something. And then we have service events. And I know that HOT and Humanists of West Florida both do really great service events, so we won't need to talk about that too much. But each of those things draws in different kinds of people, right? So I might be a person who really just wants to come to the social thing, and I don't want to come to the service event. Or maybe I only come to the library talks, and I don't want to do community service because you have to be out in the heat in Florida to do that usually, right? So it brings in different kinds of people, and it brings in some diverse people. So I get a lot of groups who say, how do we get younger folks? How do we get more diverse folks? How do we get people to be more interested in what it is that we're doing? And that's absolutely how you do it, is you offer different things for different people. I will say that what kind of put my group on the map locally was that A piece, that activism piece. And it wasn't on purpose. A lot of the times, the things that our groups will get involved in aren't something that they plan to do that is activisty, right? They're not like, let's go out and find this activist thing and do it. It's something that local members will get pissed off about. So in my case, it was that the local library had booked a sex ed class for teenagers, and the leader of that was, oh my goodness, a lesbian woman. And you would think that, I don't know what you would think, but it was insane, the amount of pushback. So they started going to county commissioner meetings and library board of trustee meetings and pushing back. And it was a group of conservative Christians who were really upset that these people would be talking to, and again, the library was sponsoring it originally, that these people would be talking to their kids. Now, of course, it was entirely up to them to sign their child up to go to this class, right? To have this class that basically the premise was, bring your teenager, they can ask me any question they want. I am a certified sex ed person. I'm in school to be a nurse at Johns Hopkins. I'm very well qualified to answer all of their questions that they might not want to ask of their gym teacher in front of their peers. And the amount of pushback was insane, enough that the library canceled the program. And I had gone and spoken at the county commissioner meeting, and it was, if some of you saw the original Footloose, it was much like the town hall there. There was praying and all sorts of weird things going on, and people standing up and talking about stuff and actually saying things that I had to go Google later, because they're like, she's going to be talking to them about this thing and that thing. And I was like, I don't even know what that is. I guess I'll have to go Google it. And it was really insane. So they caved under the pressure, and we stepped forward as a small humanist group and decided that we would rent the very same library room, get the very same instructor, and that we would present the very same class. And that was, I think, y'all, like months of coverage in the newspaper, of letters to the editor back and forth. No one had heard of our little group. Maybe we had a couple members because we were doing a highway cleanup. They'd seen our signs, so they joined us. We were on Meetup, so we had some folks in our group. We gained so many members because we caused this controversy, and we didn't mean to, right? We just were mad about a thing, and it pissed us off. So we stepped up and said, here's what we're going to do about that. And I can't tell you what that will be in your community. You're in Florida. I'm sure there's a lot of shit that pisses you off. Like, find one. There's so many things. And it can be different things for different people, right? It was sex ed for us for that time. We've caused controversies since then. We've been to town halls. We go and, bird dog all of our candidates in their local elections. We'll go and do that, ask them questions. And so there's a lot of things, especially in election year, that people can get involved in. I guess, so the thing that, when I was a volunteer and not staff at American Atheist, I would tell people is fuck the bullshit and do the things, right? I'm pretending I'm not staff right now. I'm not supposed to swear at you all, I guess, but fuck the bullshit and do the things, right? Figure out what it is that gets you inspired, figure out what it is that gets your community excited to work together on something as a community, and go do it. It doesn't matter if it is an animal shelter and you're going to all go walk dogs together. It doesn't matter if it is a sex ed class. It doesn't matter if it's going out and registering folks to vote in your local college campuses, which is a great place to go and do that. Find something that gets you excited to do it and do it together. And then, as my friend Devin says from our American Atheist stage, show the fuck up, right? Get off your couch. It has been so hard since 2020 to get people out of their living rooms and back into the town squares. We were doing so well in 2019 leading up to pandemic of really convincing atheist groups to get out there, to just get out in the streets and do whatever it was that you wanted to do. Do it with your atheist hat on, do it with your atheist shirt on, do it with your atheist pin on, and just do good work, right? Get out and be part of your community, be seen and be visible. And then 2020 just obviously took all of that to a screeching halt because we're all science-minded. We all believe in vaccines. We all stayed home. We all masked. We all were very careful, and we were very slow to come back out to society. And a lot of us got used to this format, right? Instead of leaving my house, all I have to do is get on a Zoom. But that doesn't make you visible to people outside of your community. That doesn't mean that they look and see, oh, wow, HOT's doing this good work. Oh, wow, Humanists of West Florida is doing this good work. I know you're doing the service pieces of that, which gets you out there some, but some of these activist pieces and advocacy pieces, especially in this election year, are going to be very important to our community. So I think I've ranted enough, and I can turn it over to Aron because I know he has further rants on the same subject.
I have to introduce Aron first because no one knows who he is. Thank you, Sam. That was greatly appreciated. Very timely, especially here in Florida. So yeah. And now the main event, folks. We have Aron Ra with us tonight. He is a man that truly needs no introduction. Aron has long been active. I can't even talk now. I'm done. I quit. Okay, Aron has long been an active leader in secular circles for years now. He's a science communicator and a secular activist with well over 300,000 YouTube subscribers. His videos promoting scientific skepticism, secular politics, and humanist values have been mirrored, featured, referenced, and recommended by many professional scientists, secularists, and educators. He's the director of the Phylogeny Explorer Project, which is a navigable online encyclopedic depiction of the entire taxonomic tree of life. He produces living science lessons, classroom supplement video series, teaching high school biology according to national standards, and unapologetically includes explanations of evolution, climate change, deep time, and other culturally controversial topics in America's Bible Belt. He's also the author of Foundational Falsehoods of Creationism. Aron is probably best known for contesting Texas's State Board of Education in their attempts to denigrate evolution and teach notions of conservative Christian creationism in both science and history classes of public schools. He's also on the board of American Atheist, although I need to preface that he is here on his own personal time and not as a representative of American Atheists. He's also an all-around nice guy. People don't think he is, but he's a really, really, really nice guy. And he has lots of snakes. So I'm going to encourage you all to subscribe to his YouTube channel and to support his work on Patreon. And with that, I will hand that over to Aron Ra.
Thank you very kindly. I have for decades daily debated defenders of the faith, even though they never had any actual factual evidence nor logically valid arguments either. It's always just the same old set of erroneous assumptions, distortions, and emotional nonsense endlessly repeated on an infinite loop. There is no truth to any faith, and nothing any of them can show that they got more accurate than every other faith. And they can't even collectively show that there's a there, that there even is a supernatural at all. All any of them ever had are frauds, falsehoods, and fallacies. Now, over the years, I've noticed that every logical fallacy has been used as an argument for God, and that every argument for God is a logical fallacy, like the question-begging fallacy, which is ubiquitous in every faith. circular arguments routing back to an already assumed conclusion, wherein the sacred conclusion must be reached even if there's no rational way to get there. And a true believer will never admit their failure there either. At most, they'll just change the subject with a red herring. Even the best arguments for God are fallacious, like the Kalam cosmological argument promoted by William Lane Craig, or Aquinas' argument for a necessary being, a favorite among Muslims. These are syllogisms in which not only are the premises not necessarily true, but the conclusion is a non sequitur, often depending on terms being misdefined, such that if you define truth incorrectly and you define God incorrectly too, well, then you can define God as truth and thus define your God into being. Not in any real sense, of course, just through the power of your own misunderstanding. If you use enough unfamiliar terms or concepts, maybe you can confuse someone else into sharing your delusion. That's about as much as apologists can do. That's how intelligent design proponents convinced Antony Flew, who was a philosopher, not a biologist. He didn't adequately understand evolution, and he was suffering dementia. But creationists still take that as a win. And one of the most annoying fallacies for me personally is the fallacy of false equivalence, in which we are told that atheism is a religion, or that evolutionism is the religion of atheism, and that science relies on faith just like religion does, and that science is biased just like religion is, and that there's no evidence for evolution, Big Bang, abiogenesis, etc., as if they ever cared about evidence. And then they'll say that there is evidence for creation, Noah's flood, God, etc., and then they assert that that religion is logical and reasonable, just like science, and that religion can be confirmed empirically and experimentally, just like science, and that consequently creationism is scientific. Now, these are all lies, of course, but they're all fallacious too. And the first half of these could also be interpreted as the tu quoque fallacy, the argument that you're just as bad. They're an attempt to share the blame. Think of when a child argues that he shouldn't be convicted of a crime because Timmy did it too. And the latter half of these baseless assertions are false equivalence turned into an oxymoron. That's when apparently contradictory terms appear in conjunction, like in the title of William Lane Craig's book, Reasonable Faith. There's no such thing as reasonable faith, because we understand that faith is an unreasonable conviction that is assumed without reason and defended against all reason. But religious apologists take it even further, and please forgive my reference to an old and probably racist colloquialism, the pot calling the kettle black, in which they're both black, but the pot doesn't want you to notice that it's black too, as if you're expected to accept that the kettle is guilty, but somehow not the pot. However, religious apologists take that lie even further, projecting their own faults onto those who will not share them. And this was one of the first fallacies I noticed when debating believers around about Y2K. And it's one that comes up in every single argument. When the believer accuses the unbeliever of the very thing that the believer alone is doing. So when I recognized this, I described it as the pot calling the silverware black. And a more modern interpretation of that is when we recognize that their every accusation is a confession. Now it's more like Frank Turek's book, I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist. Turek uses the correct definition of faith, which is a weird admission for a creationist, and he distances himself from faith, implicitly admitting that he already knows that faith is dishonest, but he misdefines atheism and misrepresents science as well in order to shift the burden of proof, which is another logical fallacy, as if it is no longer incumbent on the claimant to substantiate their assertion, but up to the unbeliever to disprove it. That is as backward as being considered guilty until proven innocent, when it is impossible for the court to prove innocence. Now, therefore, it must needs be the other way around. It is not up to the unbelievers to disprove every unsupported assertion of impossible absurdity that some delusional drug addict dreamt up out of nothing. No, if you say that something is true, you need to substantiate it. And Hitchens' razor reminds us that positive claims require positive evidence, and that what is asserted without evidence may be dismissed without evidence. There is no burden of proof on those who reject baseless assertions. The point is that Turek is projecting his own fault, his faith, onto atheists, even though he knows that we reject faith and that everyone knows that he is a man of faith. So he's lying both about who he is and what our position is. And we commonly see this with presuppositionalists, who even go so far as to describe rationalism as irrational. How can rationalism be irrational? That's not only a violation of the law of non-contradiction, in which a thing cannot be both itself and also not itself, or the opposite of itself. It's also another Orwellian oxymoron, using the childish argument of "I'm rubber, you're glue," such that when I'm arguing with the religious extremists, they seem to pretend as if they're the science-minded, skeptical intellectual, and I am somehow the uneducated, faithful believer in dogmatic doctrine. It's like when if you were to come into a chess game that's already mostly played out, and they realize they're on the losing side and just turn the board. That's what that logic seems like to me. And thus, every debate with a religious conservative over whether we believe is logically flawed, and every debate with a creationist is scientifically flawed. And they can't show you any truth to their position, and that should be enough. You shouldn't say that anything is true or the truth until or unless you can show the truth of it, the evidence leading to that conclusion. If you can't show that it's true at all, then why are you saying that it is? You don't know that, so you can't honestly claim it. But faith often means pretending to know what you don't know. So it doesn't bother them that whatever they're saying isn't evidently true, nor logically possible either. And it doesn't even bother them when we can immediately prove that it's false, which we usually can, and pretty easily, and I mean right now. Now, even when there was no reason to believe it, or the reason the thought they had turns out to be wrong, they're still going to believe it anyway, even when they already know that it's not really true. And the sad thing is that it's not just religious faith. Politics, too, can be even less rational than religion, and just as stubborn, just as pig-headed and opinionated and oblivious to any fact that contradicts what some might rather believe. Because in both cases, we're talking about issues of morality and manipulation of the masses and what our government is going to do to or for certain people. And the only significant difference is that politics is real. You don't need faith to believe that governments exist. We can also show data, legislation, statistics, charts, graphs, showing who did what when, as well as what worked and what didn't and why. Not that everyone listens, because politics, like religion, can be, and for some it is, a matter of tribal identity, based more on prejudice against misunderstood labels than on any actual consideration of policy. And of course, I'm talking about our currently dangerously polarized political powder keg, which I feel compelled to talk about because I have to do whatever I still can to try to save our republic from the destruction promised by over 100 conservative organizations who have signed on to Project 2025. It's a manifesto that, in summary, threatens to literally destroy our constitutional republic and replace our bureaucratic checks and balances with criminally corrupt oligarchs and unqualified loyalists to a dictator with absolute immunity. That description given in their 920-page manifesto ensures that this restructuring will cost all of our constitutional rights, at least those in the First Amendment. And more about that in a moment. If we're talking politics with ideological conservatives, then since political situations are indeed real, then there's at least the possibility that they could get something right sometimes, but often not even then. Extreme believers typically will still get everything upside down or backwards. Like when they say that everything the U.S. did wrong in our response to 9/11 was somehow Obama's fault, even though George W. Bush was president at the time and Obama wasn't anyone yet. And similarly, inflation, which began as a result of the pandemic and was exacerbated by Putin's invasion of Ukraine, and both events were global in their effects, such that no American president could be blamed for every other country's economy, they still give Trump the credit for anything good, even when he did nothing good. And they blame Biden for global inflation that was already a problem before he was elected. And they won't even acknowledge that we got inflation back down to about 3% of the US, such that our economy is actually doing better right now than anyone else's. Trump inherited a good economy, which was projected to continue through his term. And it had only underperformed a little bit before COVID. Yet his fans still credit him for Obama's economy, which took a while to build after correcting for Bush's mistakes. And they give Trump a pass for failing his pandemic response. It's a double standard based entirely on emotions, not actual data. Because they whine that right now unemployment is at a 50-year high, when really it's at a 50-year low. And conservatives are always complaining that crime is ever on the rise, yet the data shows the opposite trend, with violent crimes especially more or less consistently diminishing over the last few decades, with another profound drop just last year to the lowest points it's been in the last 50 years. But again, the facts don't matter. Remember when Obama was going to take our guns away? Remember when the right-wing media said that in the second month of the second term, Obama was going to take all our guns away and load us all into trains bound for FEMA camps. And that was supposed to prevent us from voting for Obama, of course. But then when that didn't happen, it's like, oh, we didn't say that. And now that he's not president anymore, we can say that that prediction failed, but they still think he's going to do it because they think Obama is still the one pulling Biden's strings, as if Obama is still the president, except that they think that Trump is still the president too, and that both of them are secretly locked in a power struggle against each other, just like God versus Satan. And the irony of that is that this has become a matter of identity politics, in the sense that conservatives consider Republican to be their identity more commonly and more deeply than do Democrats or anybody else. Every Democrat I know wants to fix the problems in our own party, where almost all the Republicans I know want to add to the growing list of issues in and coming from their party. For example, I don't worship Joe Biden. He is deeply flawed, and I would have chosen 5 other candidates over him. But these MAGA conservatives really do worship Trump. They think he is a literal godsend. And some of them have even taken Trump as their Messiah, complaining that Jesus is too woke. Texas Republicans, I've heard in a political rally, this one speaker said that they are born into the Republican Party and that they owe their party loyalty as a birthright. It doesn't matter what the policies are. Just vote for whichever convicted fraud and or rapist has an R next to their name. In Project 2025's Mandate for Leadership, they say that in the late 1970s, that was the moment when the political right unified itself and led the United States to historic political, economic, and global victories, which I interpret to mean that that's when conservative groups more actively impeded, retarded, or reversed progress in every application, especially in education and social justice. Whenever things get better, not just for rich, straight, white Christian men exclusively, but for everyone across the board, I would call that progress. But they call it decline, social decline, and they whine about the horrors of multiculturalism, refusing to be considerate of anyone else. This is my country, damn it. And this is where they contrast Americans versus other ethnicities, as if America is an ethnicity and an exclusively white one. And they say that the Reagan administration was when things started getting better for them. And I see Reaganomics as the catalyst, creating a domino effect of cascading economic failure, taking us to where we are now. Where to live as well as we once did, we now have to earn at least 5 times as much because everything costs 10 times more than it used to. And as an aside, I should share this. I mean, I remember back in the 80s, I went to go see Ozzy Osbourne and Judas Priest. And it was $15 to get in, and there were dollar drafts. And then 5 years ago, I went to go see Ozzy and Judas Priest. Only it was $150 to get in and $10 for beer. So everything is 10 times as much, but we're not making 10 times as much. And then I remember that by the 1990s, these conservatives began their crusade to undermine science and integrate church and state and empower corporations to act like they're people. Everything the founding fathers tried to prevent. I don't worship the founders either, though I acknowledge that these men of enlightenment were especially well educated on exactly these topics. They warned us not to infuse government with religion, nor with corporations either. But as Orwell showed us in his book Animal Farm, over time, the evils that be will slowly erode our protections little bit by little bit. And if they get their foot in the door, they'll force in a lot more. Then the George W. Bush administration sounded like the audiobook of Orwell's more famous book, 1984. where the formation of Homeland Security, the Department of Homeland Security, sounded a lot like the phrase that war is peace, freedom is slavery, and ignorance is strength. And now things have just gotten worse. Remember that these people argue that if we teach about the racism in American history, whether it's the civil rights movement or the cause of the Civil War, these Orwellian conservatives, at least the white ones, will complain that these lessons are themselves reverse racism, that it would somehow be racist for students to learn that American history was so heavily tainted by racism. It used to be that if you were woke, that meant that you were aware of how certain demographics in this country, whether women, minorities, queer folk, etc., had more issues to deal with socially and professionally than straight white Christian men. And being aware that a problem exists, even if it's not your problem, you're aware that other people have this thing to consider that maybe is not such a big issue for you, but you don't want to contribute to it. You don't want to make it worse. That's a position of consideration and compassion. But these Orwellian conservatives have made compassion into a bad thing. In fact, they say that being considerate of other people's problems is somehow the absolute worst thing anyone can do. But it gets even worse, because many of these Orwellian conservatives don't know enough about politics to understand that even their political identities are not what they think they are. For example, the leader of the so-called Law and Order Party is a convicted felon, as are many of his former cabinet, several of whom are still in prison. And several more of these congressmen are going up against various felony charges. And they didn't care about the other crimes that Trump committed for which he was impeached twice either. They knew he was guilty. They just weren't going to hold him responsible, because the party of personal responsibility doesn't care that their president lied over 30,000 times while in office. They don't care that he cheats at golf, that he cheats at his taxes, that he cheats at his employees, that he cheated in the last election, and that his associates have already recently admitted, when they didn't realize they were being recorded, about how he is already trying to cheat the next election too. And they don't care that he cheated on all of his wives, to fornicate and adultery and pornography. They brag about their Christian values, but have you noticed that these values really are just prejudicial intolerance? Their moral values are when they pretend not to indulge in anything that looks, feels, or tastes good. Their family values are just hatred of queer folk. Their Christian values are just intolerance of everyone else, including most other Christians. And their American values are just racism. Republicans call themselves the party of Lincoln, as contrasted with the Democrats, who were once considered to be the party of the Ku Klux Klan. But that was a century ago. In the 1960s, there was the Southern strategy, wherein the parties swapped positions on several policies, such that the Klan is officially Republican now, with their leadership endorsing Donald Trump, which should surprise no one anymore. Then there's the Patriot Party, and all those who call themselves patriots, but who really were on January 6th and still today engaged in an attempt to overthrow our republic, to end everything our Constitution stood for. Insurrectionists are not patriots, and patriots would not have attempted an insurrection. They say that they're for small government, and they say, I worship the state. But remember that these people advocate for stop and frisk profiling, where all of your papers better be on you and in order at all times, just like it used to be in the Soviet Union. I want a smaller and weaker government than they do. If you believe in personal liberty, then remember that these ideological conservatives want the biggest, most intrusive, restrictive, and oppressive government one can imagine, one that monitors, legislates, and regulates or prohibits even the most intimate aspects of your private life and personal identity. So now they're back to just projecting all of Trump's faults onto Biden. So I was told a couple days ago that every fucking thing, in all caps, that I say that Trump will do is exactly, in all caps, what Biden is already doing, except that it's not me saying that. It's the conservative mandate for leadership saying what they will do for Trump so that he doesn't have to do anything. We know what those things are, how anti-American all of those things are, and we know that the Biden administration is not interested in doing any of those things. Quite the opposite. But how do you reason with someone out of an unreasonable belief? So they tell me that Biden is incompetent after 50 years of political experience. Well, the only thing Trump is good at is bankrupting business after business, even money laundering casinos that you'd think couldn't possibly fail and wouldn't fail without utter incompetence bringing it down. That's every business Trump ever owned. Even though Biden has only one close relative with a criminal conviction, a son who is not involved in his administration, and is apparently not going to get a pardon from daddy either. I am told that that's the Biden crime family. But the Trump family business was fraud, and they were fined millions for it. Although the kids only got a slap on the wrist each, that's still a crime family. And they tell me that Biden shits himself. But Donald von Schitzenpants is the one who reportedly stinks, according to many witnesses. He's the one known to wear diapers and whose flatulence is famous in courtrooms and boardrooms. And then they tell me that Biden has dementia and that he doesn't know where he is and that he can't finish a sentence simply because he stuttered a bit all of his life. But Trump is the one who keeps forgetting where he is. Is this Sioux Falls? Is this Sioux City? And he interrupts himself, and he frequently displays phonemic paraphasia, which alarms psychiatrists as it is a known symptom of dementia, and he's running for president. Yeah, one of our presidential candidates apparently has dementia, and it's not the one you're saying it is. But the more important thing to understand is what is really at stake in this election is our Constitution and the republic for which it stands, especially the First Amendment, because Trump has tried to undermine every provision thereof. And he's even said that he should be allowed to change the parts that he doesn't like. And Putin did that with the Constitution of the Russian Federation, granting himself more power, at which point the entire Russian government quietly resigned. I don't think many Americans know that because we don't pay attention like we should, but that happened. So let's read the First Amendment. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of a religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. Trump has already contradicted both of these. For one thing, he's many times parroted conservative views on establishing Christianity as the state religion, and Project 2025 promises to infuse Christian nationalism into the next conservative administration. They want to make this a Christian country, and the leaders of Project 2025 also are heads of other organizations whose mission goal is the Christianization of America. And that is a violation of the Establishment Clause. And then Trump's repeated calls to ban Muslim immigrants and other things like that are a violation of the Prohibition Clause. Now, moving on to the next line. Or abridging, Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech or of the press. To quote the ACLU, Trump has made it very clear that he doesn't stand for freedom of the press. As a presidential candidate, he told supporters he would open up the libel laws to sue journalists. We're going to have people sue you like you never got sued before, he promised. Trump, the candidate, also blacklisted reporters and entire news outlets from campaign events, referred to journalists as scum and slime, and mocked a reporter for having a disability. He vowed to sue women who reported incidents of sexual harassment and assault, along with outlets that covered their accounts, and threatened a lawsuit against a Hispanic journalist group for calling out his bigoted remarks. I would never kill them, but I do hate them, he said of reporters, and some of them are such lying, disgusting people. To quote the United Nations High Commissioner of Human Rights, Trump's attacks are strategic, designed to undermine confidence in reporting and raise doubts about verifiable facts. The president has labeled the media as being the enemy of the American people, very dishonest or fake news, and has accused the press of distorting democracy, of spreading conspiracy theories and blind hatred. These attacks run counter to the country's obligations to respect press freedom and international human rights law. To quote Harvard Kennedy School, President Donald Trump accused the press of being an enemy of the American people. Attacks on the media had been a hallmark of Trump's presidential campaign. But this charge marked a dramatic turning point. Language like this ventured into dangerous territory. 20th century dictators, notably Stalin, Hitler, and Mao, had all denounced their critics, especially the press, as enemies of the people. Their goal was to delegitimize the work of the press as fake news and create confusion in the public mind about what's real and what isn't, and what can be trusted and what can't be. And all of this implies that if Trump gets elected again, we will no longer have a free press. We will instead have only state-controlled right-wing propaganda channels like Fox News and OAN. And finally, on the First Amendment, Congress shall make no law prohibiting the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for redress of grievances. Now, I mentioned this in another video recently, but it bears repeating. Remember that just shortly before Trump was elected, there was a long standoff between a predatory oil pipeline violently attacking and oppressing the Sioux Nation at Standing Rock on the border between North and South Dakota. Obama was invested in this pipeline, and so was Hillary, and so was Trump. And not a lot of people knew that this was going on because these people were invested in it, and it wasn't a good look. I was there to see with my own eyes what corporate greed would do to the people who literally got in the way with psyops and rubber bullets and the like. There were no network news channels getting in there. Only little internet news agencies like Democracy Now! So the only news made it out was by way of social media, until, amusingly, the Justice League arrived to help. The actors who played Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, and Cyborg showed up to get a little publicity out. And then Mark Ruffalo, who played the Hulk in the MCU, showed up too with a massive solar power generator so that everyone could charge their phones. Then when we found out the Sioux Nation was going to be defended in court by none other than Erin Brockovich, Obama finally realized there's no way to keep the publicity off of this, and he caved to the Army Corps of Engineers, who pulled the plug. If Hillary had won the election, she would have stood by that decision, but Trump won. And not only did he immediately and illegally reverse it, resuming construction, which of course resulted in multiple oil spills, polluting the only available water supply in the area, but Trump also sent in law enforcement to clear out the protesters, and he tried to expand an existing law such that it would have become illegal to protest commercial construction projects. And remember that this is the same guy who 4 years ago ordered the police to tear gas a crowd who were protesting police brutality. What do you think Trump will do if he gets to use the military to shut down every protest, which is part of the Project 2025? They want to give him military to use against American civilians as police, just like North Korea. And Trump has already said that he wants to do this, that this would give him the chance to do what he always wanted to do. He wanted to change parts of the Constitution however he wants. Other provisions of Project 2025 would allow that too, regardless of what the Supreme Court says. So that under Trump, your right to peaceably assemble to petition the government for redress of grievances will look more like the massacre at Tiananmen Square. So there go your rights under the First Amendment, all of them. And you might think that if they don't make it this time, that in the next election cycle, they'll just try again, and they will. They've been trying since Reagan. However, what I read from the actual project manifesto says that they see this election as their last good chance to actually do it. So if we can beat them this time, and the only way to do that is to vote for Joe Biden, then we can save the republic, and then we can immediately fix a whole lot of other issues to better defend against the next such threat from enemies foreign, but especially from enemies domestic.
Thank you, Aron.
Thank you kindly.
And that is Orwellian conservatism right there. I feel like I need to say that HOT and Humanists of West Florida are 501c3s, and we are not allowed to take political positions as groups, but as individuals, we can feel about that however we want. So bravo, Aron. So we're going to open this up to questions for Aron. And just as a side note, after we're done tonight, Sam is actually going to stay on a little bit longer if you want to ask specific questions about groups or becoming part of American Atheist or getting more engaged. But for now, we're going to open this up to questions. If you have one, you can either put it in the chat, just like my friend Will did, or you can raise your hand. Please keep them to questions, not necessarily comments. So we'll ask, what's a good way that normal people can push back on this bullshit?
The best I've got is we need to get a lot more publicity out about what's happening. We need to show the validity of it. And I've been doing that by showing a bunch of different news stations talking about it, and also providing links to the manifesto itself. I've got another video that I'll be making soon, and this is with the president of the Heritage Foundation boasting what the manifesto will do. So they're saying in their own words what's going to happen. And another interesting thing, when they asked this guy, will you accept the results of the election? And he says, oh, yeah, if there's not massive fraud like there was last time. When they challenge him on whether there was massive fraud last time, his own organization was able to find 1,800 cases of voter fraud since 1982. And therefore, they're calling him out. They're like, where is this massive fraud? He goes, well, it's very hard to document. Well, how can you say there's massive voter fraud? You're just talking out of your ass. You're just deciding that your man's going to win. Heads I win, tails you lose, and then we're going to force our religion onto everybody, and we won't have any more public schools. And you wouldn't believe all the shit that's written into it, because I could just go on. It's insidious, and it's terrifying. This is the most significant election of my life, and I'm 60. Well, I'm 61 now. Yeah, Kennedy was president when I was born. This is the most significant election of my life, and I am tired of voting for the lesser evil. So if we manage to save the republic this time, we're going to fix some shit immediately thereafter. Mm-hmm. And there are some politicians in the Democratic Party who are going to help with that.
Yeah, I know most of us have our videos off, but is everyone aware of what Project 2025 is? I don't know if you can raise your hand or do the thumbs up reaction. A lot of people know what Project 2025 is? I know Mark knows. Yep. A lot of you do. Okay. Pretty good. Okay. All right. Yeah. I think it's one of the most, like you said, it's one of the most insidious things. And I remember when Project Blitz was a thing a few years back. That was like a secret though. They kept that behind the curtain. And Project 2025 has its own website. Why are they so ballsy?
They think they're going to win. And one of the reasons they think they're going to win is that they actually do have a cheat. So Roger Stone was interviewed, somebody who, I guess he didn't know that he was talking to a reporter. He thought he was talking to a friendly, probably a pretty young friendly. And so he would just be open to say any stupid thing, but he let loose that, how they're, and there's an article in Rolling Stone, a recent article in Rolling Stone that goes into detail on how they plan to steal the 2024 election, and how they have, you remember that famous call to Georgia to find the 11,800 votes? Well, they've replaced a lot of key people in Georgia, so they will have a different result this time. They'll just be able to find those votes.
Interesting.
Yeah, if they have to manufacture them, they're going to find them. So if it wasn't dishonest enough to do all the gerrymandering that they still do, and all the redistricting, and all of that, these are people who randomly, calmly, shamelessly lie about every damn thing. The end justifies the means. Remember when Mitch McConnell and Lindsey Graham both flip-flopped on, you hold me to my account when I say we're not going to position a judge three weeks before the election, and then we get the opportunity that they get to put their judge, and the election has already begun. People have already started voting, and they're going to replace that judge because their word means shit.
All right. Ashton has a really good question. I like this. So, is it a lost cause, or should we prioritize recovering from the division amongst Americans, as well as rebuilding trust in our institutions? And how should we go about that?
Well, the tall order is the fake news. So they've had they have where I can't communicate with anybody in my family, because if I show them any kind of mainstream news, they automatically do the genetic fallacy. Well, that didn't come from my favorite propaganda channel that only tells me what I want to hear. That came from something else. And when you point out that there's lots of different ways, we can also go to independent sources, and there's many different ways that we can confirm that this is real. They don't want to know what is real. They want to believe what they want to believe because I don't know, that makes them feel special. That makes them feel elite. It makes them feel like there's one thing in the world they understand.
Hmm.
So communicating to these people, the principal thing is they're going to try to find anything wrong with whatever you say. So be careful that if you're going to say a thing, Google it up, make sure that Snopes or whatever has confirmed that thing is accurate. Make sure that you say it exactly accurate. I had somebody coming down on me when I was bragging that, okay, where our inflation rate is only 3%. And he gets angry at me and says, well, but prices are still going up though. So debunked your argument. Yeah, it's an inflation rate. That means it's inflating. That means prices go up, but at a slower rate here than in every other economy. So we're doing better than everybody else, but they don't hear that. We're talking about people who do not want to use reason. And yeah, we're in a very dangerous position because of it.
All right. So Søren says he doesn't know much about Project 2025. And honestly, Søren, I don't either. And I feel like I'm really involved in this work.
It's only 920 pages.
It's an easy read. It's a quick read. But does it have anything to do about individual and corporate tax structure? So, because Reagan and Trump lowered both so much for the wealthy, it seems even the Democratic Party is not even able to alter that.
Yeah, well, they lowered taxes on the super rich, but ended up complicating things for regular people. And what Project 2025 wants to maintain is that the super rich don't pay taxes, and they're securing a way that the super rich will never pay taxes. So the poor people, they'll pay 3% or something stupid like that. Whereas Trump suggested getting rid of the IRS entirely and replacing everything with tariffs, because Trump thinks that when you put a tariff on a foreign import, that it's the foreign country that pays the tariff. Mr. Super Businessman doesn't understand that it's the people, the Americans, that are having to pay the tariffs. And the result would be that we would end up having to pay 122% on whatever we buy. So vastly worse than the IRS, but vastly worse than keeping a tax structure. Well, of course, if reasonable minds win, rich people will still have to pay their taxes. The critical thing is that it has to be this election. If we lose this one, we lose it all. If they lose this one, they've already said in their mandate, they're aware they're not going to get an opportunity like this again. If we win this election, we can flesh out the Supreme Court. We can impose term limits. We can do a whole lot of things. We can codify Roe v. Wade. There's a whole lot of stuff that we can do to fix things more or less permanently. And I'm going for a whole lot more. I'm petitioning for ranked voting because I'm sick to death of this lesser evil shit. And I don't like that there's so much ridiculous money in politics. I don't know what to do about that because we've got the most corrupt system on the planet. And this is just a way for people to become millionaires, run for office. Did I mention in my presentation that the Trump kids stole tens of thousands of dollars from a charity, from a children's charity? to buy a portrait of Donald Trump.
Insane.
Yeah.
Buzz, I see you have your hand raised there.
I can't type, so I'm going to ask you a question about Project 2025, but the third party thing. I was in a software, a social media exchange today with a fellow that I know. He was criticizing Biden. I sort of took him to task on it. His big objection was his words, Gaza genocide. And then I finally got him. I finally tried to find out if he's going to vote for Trump. He said no, that he was going to vote green. And I said, oh, well, I've been green for a long, long time. And if we had ranked choice voting, they would rank very highly. But I said, we don't. And so what's my question to you then is, this election is going to come down to maybe these third party people again, just numbers of few thousands of votes. What can we say to them? How do we?
Yeah, just think if we had ranked voting in 2016, we'd have a different president. Yeah, we'd have had Bernie, and that's how we got Sarah Palin out. By the way, Alaska managed to put in ranked voting. So this whole lesser evil thing depends entirely on not having ranked voting, because anybody that tries to vote for a third party just ends up taking away from the preferred person so that the greater evil wins. And that's just the way we're set up. When I ran for office myself, I was told that I would have to have, for my humble little district, I was going to have $35,000 to begin with and start raising more money from there. My opponent was given a check for $2 million because that was after Trump had been elected and all the rules threw out the window. But if I'd run in a similar district in the UK, I would be capped at £35,000 that you're only allowed to spend up to that amount. So I'm preferring that a whole lot more. Put limits on that and criminalize people that overspend, that pump so much money into this. We have to have a very different system. But the problem is it is so corrupt and people get so rich off of this. How do you stop it? We are one of the most corrupt governments on the planet.
Well, Lauren has a question here. There are just a lot of people who have these really deeply ingrained ideas, like the woman in Louisiana who got the 10 Commandments put into schools. Like, they think these bills and these ideas are right morally. People who think they are moral are hard to be convinced that they are wrong. So what do you do with this deeply ingrained belief?
You got it.
Lauren Boebert just said that she's glad that they want to put the 10 Commandments in, because you need the 10 Commandments to teach children not to steal. We need good Christian guys to teach children not to steal. I guess completely forgetting that her son is up on 22 charges of theft. Because we need moral standards, like no fornicating or whatever, like in the Beetlejuice theater. But she also mentioned that there's this thing in that you should honor your father and your mother, that you will live a long life. And so she says, well, see, just honoring your father and mother will cause you to live a long life. That's because there are other passages in the Bible that say that if you dishonor your father and mother, they can have you killed. I would love to point that out to her.
All right. We have maybe time for one more question, or we think we might be good. All right. Well, Aron and Sam, thank you. I am going to remember that we are going to stay on. I'm going to pass this off to Buzz to give the closing remarks.
Okay.
And then we're going to stop the recording and you are free to leave, but Sam, I know, is going to stay on and chit chat. If you have any other questions for her. All right. So Buzz, take it away.
Okay, on behalf of Humanists of Tallahassee and the Humanists of West Florida, thank you very much, Aron Ra. You were excellent. Very good talk. Really, really enjoyed it. Thanks, Sam McGuire, for what you do. Thank you, Devin, for putting this together. Appreciate it. And Betty Myers and I are over here in Pensacola, and we kind of encouraged Devin, and she did a great job. So thank you all.
Thank you kindly. All right, I'm gonna bow out and
right.
take care of some business I gotta do.
You gotta feed those snakes. All right.
End
Have
of
a
the
good night,
thing, yeah.
everyone.